On a warm night under a blanket of stars, a group of slaves gathered secretly in the fields of a vast plantation. Among them were Messias's parents, holding their newborn daughter. They lifted her to the heavens and prayed, "Creator, this is our daughter, and we call her Messias." The group rejoiced, celebrating the birth of a child whose spirit shone brightly even in the darkest of times. Messias grew into a spirited young girl, her heart full of dreams beyond the confines of the plantation. By the time she was 16, she often spoke of leaving, yearning to see the world beyond. Her parents and others cautioned her, explaining the dangers and the impossibility of escape for a slave. Frustrated, Messias would storm off, determined to find a way to freedom. Each day, Messias toiled in the fields, picking cotton under the scorching sun. Lunchtime was a brief respite with a meager meal of slop, eaten right there among the rows of cotton. After dusk, she moved to the big house, helping the head house slave prepare elaborate meals for the master's family. Once the children were asleep, she bathed and dressed them, snatching leftovers if any remained, or making do with a thin soup before returning to her quarters for a few hours of rest. One night, weary from her endless labor, Messias confided in her parents. "I have a plan to leave," she whispered urgently. Despite their pleading, she was resolute. "I will leave. There is more out there for me." Her rebellious spirit never waned. One day, under a tree, she spoke with Amos, an older slave. He shared whispered tales of the North, where slaves escaped to freedom. His words ignited her resolve. That night, Messias spotted Amos sitting outside, staring at the stars. "Messias," he called, "you can't leave." But she replied firmly, "I'm leaving tonight." Amos's face clouded with fear, remembering those who had been caught and punished severely. But Messias's mind was made up. She returned to her quarters, explaining to her tearful parents that she was heading north to the big water where the land ends. Grabbing a few belongings, she slipped into the night, joining others in the woods, all bound for freedom. The journey was perilous. They traveled by night, crossing rivers and streams and evading search parties. At a campfire, a slave leader pointed out directions for them to split up. Messias learned she would have to continue alone, reaching the beginning of the Northland where things were slightly safer. She was scared but determined. In the light of day, Messias walked along a road, fishing and cooking to survive. Eventually, she reached a town where free black people took her in, recognizing her as a runaway. They explained she couldn't cause trouble, as it might endanger others. Messias rested, planning to head to the big water. They arranged for her to work at a nearby farmhouse to earn money. Each morning, Messias walked to the farmhouse, often taking a river trail back, where she met Samuel and his son Benjamin fishing by their house. Their friendship grew over days of brief, pleasant conversations. One night, Messias left the farmhouse later than usual. Trouble was brewing. That night, townspeople, blaming her for an issue at the farm, came for her. The black man she stayed with warned her, and she fled, chased by torch-wielding townspeople. She ran alongside the river, knowing she couldn't go back to the plantation. Reaching a bridge, she realized her only option was to jump. Climbing onto a rail, she hesitated, then plunged into the raging waters. The townspeople watched in shock as she disappeared into the current. Meanwhile, Benjamin rushed home, telling Samuel what had happened. Samuel, distraught, took his boat upstream, hoping against hope to find her. He reached the bridge, staring at the swirling waters below, fearing the worst, but clinging to the hope that Messias's indomitable spirit might yet see her through.